thank you all for being here today. My name is State Representative William Boddie of House District 62, which encompasses South Fulton and Douglas County. I'm also the Communications Chair of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus. I'm here today with members of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus, and I'm also here with members of the House Democratic Caucus. So we're here today to discuss the voter purge notices that went out back in July of this year to over 45,000 residents and registered voters of Fulton County. Those notices were sent out improperly. Those notices were a part of the biennial effort by the state of Georgia to clean up the rosters every other year. And we are not disputing the other almost 400 to 500 notices that were sent out. We can't verify whether those notices were improper or not, but we can verify the 45,000 that were improper in Fulton County. I have reached out to the Fulton County Board of Elections chief, as well as the Fulton County Board of Elections registration chief, and they're both working diligently to come up with a resolution. This resolution will be twofold. One, we want to make sure that all voters, 45,000 voters that improperly receive what they call a confirmation notice, what we call a purge notice, receive some type of other notice or notification via press release, website, stated that they are not inactive and they can vote in the November 7th elections. That will be the elections for the mayor of Atlanta, the mayor of other municipalities within Fulton County. Also, it would affect the special election for the Fulton County Board of Commission District number 4 that was held by my dear friend, the late John Garner. So we want to make sure that we address these issues here today. I have members of both caucuses that are here, and they're going to speak. First, I would like to introduce our leader. Our leader here today is Bob Trimble. He was newly elected to that role. We're happy to have him in that role, and he's going to give a couple of words.
Thank you, Representative Boddie. It's an honor to be here and stand with my colleagues in opposition to the government imposition of burdens on the fundamental right to vote. Participation in the democratic process is something that the Democratic Caucus believes strongly in, and the fundamental constitutional right to vote is something that we should make easier for voters, and we should make participation in the democratic process easier. Want to make sure that we encourage everyone, registered voters included, to be sure and exercise that right, to avoid being placed on an inactive voter list, which would subject you to receiving a purge notice and potentially to purge. Look forward to the opportunity to have my colleagues share with you, and thank you for being here today. And at this time, I would introduce the Vice Chairman of our Democratic Caucus, Representative Erica Thomas.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Leader Trimble. I just want to echo what my colleagues have already said, and that we will not stand for this. What we stand for is that every voice out there is heard. And by purging these voter rosters, their voices are not being heard. And so we will stand strong with the people because we are a representative of the people. And if they're not able to vote, we can't have our voices. And so we want to make sure that if there's anyone that has a question about if they are on the roster, if they're voting, if they're active, please contact your precincts, please contact your counties in which you have registered to make sure that you are on that roster so that your voice can be heard in November's elections and elections to come. Thank you.
Next, I want to introduce Representative David Dreyer. He is a voting rights activist and active in the voting rights process as far as making sure individuals and make sure voters across the state of Georgia and the metro area are informed and they know their rights to vote. So we're honored and we thank you for being here today, Representative.
Thank you, Representative Boddie, for organizing this, and thank you for the caucus leadership and the members of the caucus that are here today. When we're talking about over 45,000 people in Fulton County that have received these notices, as Representative Boddie said, that's not counting the over 500,000 people that the Secretary of State has purged from the voting rolls. And we're talking about the 45,000 people. These are people that followed state law, and when they moved within the county, they moved from one place to the county to the other, they filed a change of address. And under state law, when you file that change of address with the United States Postal Service, your voting registration is automatically supposed to be updated. You're not required to take any other action. But instead, the Fulton County Board of Elections has sent out a notices saying that they're going to list people that moved in this fashion as inactive, and it's going to make it so they might not be eligible to vote. And at the very least, they have to take extra steps. Organizations that look at voting rights call this kind of pattern an obstacle of bureaucratic hurdles that make it harder to vote. And this has been going on for a long time, and we need to be especially careful about this in the South. Some of our voter suppression things go all the way back to Reconstruction, and they're still on the books. But it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be hard. Look at other states. Some states have same-day voter registration. I got an email. I got on some political list on Colorado. They sent me an email. They thought I was a Colorado voter. I'm not. I never have been. But they said, you can show up to the polls, you can register to vote, and you can vote today. You should be able to do that. You should be able to show up, change your address, and vote. The government knows if you're an eligible voter or not. We should prioritize letting people's voices be heard and not making it harder, and that's why we're standing against this today. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Dreyer. Before we get to the closing of this press conference, I want to make sure that we recognize other state representatives here today. I will start with our new Democratic House Caucus Chairman, Beverly James, Representative Beverly James out of Macon, Georgia. Thank you for being here today. Also, we have Representative Ava Mabel out of Atlanta. Thank you for being here today. And we have Sam Park, who is out of Gwinnett County here today. In close, I want to echo what all of the state representatives have mentioned here today, is that this is an issue. Voter suppression is an issue. Voter intimidation is an issue. We want to make sure that if it's any type of intimidation or suppression, either intentionally or unintentionally, we want to make sure we address the issue. We don't know if these notices were sent intentionally or not, those 45,000, but we know that they were sent. And so now it's becoming upon us as elected officials that we make sure that we get out the word that, look, if you are an inactive voter, that still means that in the state of Georgia, you still can vote. So what we want to make sure those individuals do is change your address, update your address. We'll go and vote on November the 7th. That is important. We also want to address with our leadership, and our leadership will be reaching out to the Secretary of State's office on what we do going forward so this doesn't happen in 2019, because this cannot occur again. Right now we have 45,000 in Fulton County. We don't want to have 100,000 in Fulton County in 2019, and this issue not be addressed to prevent that. But we're here today. We're here standing together. The Georgia Legislative Black Caucus is nonpartisan, but we're here with the House Democratic Caucus because this is not necessarily a partisan issue. This is a voting issue. It is an access to the ballot, which is your constitutional right in these United States. And we want to make sure that every Georgia citizen, not just in the metro area, know that you cannot be intimidated. You won't be intimidated. We're going to be behind you. We'll make sure that you're going to inform on your rights. And we'll make sure we're going to do something to correct this mistake that the SOS and the Fulton County Board of Elections stated that this is. So we will close right now, but I will take any questions and answers for anybody at this point in time. Do you have any? Yes.
You said you couldn't really speak beyond the 45,000 in Fulton County, but does it appear to be unique to Fulton County? I mean, is it possible that the mistake that you're describing, that it did happen outside of Fulton?
I have talked with individuals, and they stated it is a possibility that other metro areas were affected. However, right now, we can't necessarily speak on that because we don't have concrete evidence that it did occur in other areas. So that's another reason why we brought in the whole caucus, because we want to address the issue for Fulton County, but let other voters throughout the state of Georgia know that if you did receive some type of notice, and if you have not moved with outside of your county, or if you have voted in the last 2 elections, but you received a notice stating that you're inactive, go change your address and update it, but make sure you go out and vote, because the word inactive does not mean that you're unregistered in the state of Georgia, and you still can vote.
Who actually made the mistake?
Well, what the Fulton County Board of Elections is stating is that they receive the notices directly from the Secretary of State. It is the only thing they are obligated to do at that point in time is to mail the notices out. So basically what they're stating to us is that they're, of course, work at the direction of the Secretary of State, who's the chief of all elections and registrations for voters in the state of Georgia. So basically they were just doing their job and sending out the notices because that's what they've been mandated to do by the Secretary of State. So obviously we need to definitely reach out to the Secretary of State to see how we can correct this problem in the future.
Is it just an administrative error? I mean, you don't think there's any kind of legislative change that might need to be pursued in the future by you guys?
Well, we believe that this is something that's internal that the Secretary of State could possibly work out to work the wrinkles out of. We don't necessarily think it's something that needs to be done at the state level as far as any new legislation, but we definitely think it's something administrative that they could do. And I'll let that.
Is it okay?
Yes.
If I can also add, though, right, we're hoping to rectify this in the way Representative Boddie just said, but we have a host of other voting rights bills that we have proposed. We have the things that I mentioned earlier: same-day voter registration, same-day change of address. But we've been stymied every step of the way. We have one that's incredibly simple and that would be incredibly effective, is let people vote at any precinct in their county on Election Day. So if you were commuting and you get stuck close to your job and you might not have time to get home because of traffic, you can vote at the downtown library as long as you're a Fulton County resident. But we haven't even been able to get a committee hearing on that. But we continue to work on these things to make it easier to vote so that we can catch up with other states so that everybody's voice can be heard. So we have, it was part of our caucus proposal last year, and we'll be talking about doing it again this year. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
I'd just like to add, there are, as Representative Dreyer said, there are some legislative fixes, things we need to do. We, in recent years, I think in 2010, made a statutory mechanism that made it easier to purge voters or set them up to purge voters in a mass process. And anytime we do that, we are imposing a government burden that voters then have to do something affirmatively, whether that's send something back in, go in to correct their address. The issue of same-day registration would solve these problems. Mm-hmm. So if we're making it harder to stay on the voting rolls, then we're having an impact on people's ability to participate in the democratic process. And so that is a legislative issue that we need to look to.
And I definitely appreciate Leader Tremel and Representative David Dreyer speaking to that. And you're absolutely correct, Leader. The National Voter Registration Act of 1993 basically mandates that 44 states have to abide by the laws as far as purging is concerned. However, it is 5 or 6 states, including Idaho and Minnesota, that don't have to abide by this particular law because they have same-day registration on voting day. So that's one of the exceptions. The state of Georgia probably would not have to have these regulations if we had some type of same-day registration on election day. So that is a part of the federal statute. We definitely would love for Georgia to go that route because then we would definitely have more individuals who wake up on vote day and say, look, I think I want to vote. And they'll have the opportunity to do that. But at this point, they don't. Do we have any more questions of anybody else? Well, thank you all for coming here today. We'll appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to participate in this press conference. Thank you.